I appreciate your indulgence, Mr. Chairman. Again, I want to mention the letter from GPA to be considered for unanimous consent afterwards.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Again, I want to mention that I have the honor and privilege of representing one of the great economic engines of the Southeast, and that is the Georgia Ports Authority. In my district alone, we have two major seaports, the Port of Savannah and the Port of Brunswick. And both of these ports have done a yeoman's work with outside groups and with the local community to invest in forward-looking decisions that benefit the port and the surrounding areas. They've made tremendous investments in the port that benefit the community. They've used the DARA program to replace old trucks. They've electrified their cranes, and they've upgraded their rail infrastructure to take additional trucks off of the road and a lot more. However, I'm worried that programs like the Port Electrification and Decarbonization Program under the Clean Future Act could potentially hamstring the progress that's being made by ports to upgrade older technology. And I wanted to ask you, Mr. Holly, shouldn't we be focusing on making sure all these ports get the assistance they need to advance environmental and public health outcomes?
Yes, sir, we should.
Good, thank you. Do we need to be careful, Mr. Holly, about putting too many requirements in place to participate?
Absolutely, yes, sir, Mr. Carter.
Good, thank you again. Mr. Holly, in previous testimony in front of the Natural Resources Committee, you talked about a specific project that could have benefited an environmental justice community, but was canceled, the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. What lessons should we be taking away from this about inhibiting or stopping industries from moving forward with construction or upgrades when those investments will benefit the communities?
My goodness, that was a plan that they had the restrictions. What they had done in terms of just requirements and regulations, they had gone 10 times the amount in terms of what they were asked to do in terms of putting together for safety regulations. And so many people right now are still suffering because of the lack of natural gas that pipeline was going to produce.
Well, if the goal is to create jobs and to get money out to people, shouldn't we be predicating grants and other forms of money on issues like whether or not the employees have previously been incarcerated or if they have ties to the foster care system?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Holly. Mr. Hawkins, I want to go to you next because you mentioned something in your testimony that I'm very interested in, and that is the opportunity zones. And you've talked about the benefit of opportunity zones to bolster disadvantaged and low-income communities. And yes, I have a lot of low-income communities in my district, and I'm very concerned about them, and I want to help them as much as I can. What's the best adjustment, Mr. Hawkins, that we can make to the policy to spur more investment in operating businesses like energy projects? I think you're muted.
I appreciate the question, Representative Carter, and the best adjustment that can be made is to allow any type of capital, not just capital gains, to be used for the purposes of the 10-year 100% step up in basis. So briefly, the Opportunity Zone policy has 3 levels of benefit. One based on deferring capital gains, and another one based on a step up in basis on your initial capital gain. But the largest benefit goes to investors that make a long-term, 10 years or more commitment to an investment. And so for those purposes, we should allow non-capital gains to be invested. That way, we can democratize the capital that's coming in, but also greatly increase the resources that come in and fund those operating businesses. And so, it's if I could wave a wand, that'd be the primary adjustment I would make to this policy in this next round of legislation.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. I know I'm out of time, but I do want to mention, Mr. Hawkins, that your opportunity zones have been aligned with EPA to deal with brownfields, and that is something that is very important in my district. I appreciate you bringing that up, and I appreciate your work on that as well. Mr. Chairman, again, I want to say this letter, and I'll yield. Thank you.
Okay.